Hi,
for
Brooke.
good reason. What's up, Brooke?
Hello. I want to know where you're off to.
I know. I wish I could stay. It's my daughter's 12th birthday. And she came to me and we're doing a huge party tonight, Brooke. All these 12-year-old girls, we're gonna have a slumber party. There's gonna be about 12 girls. I'm in for a night. Okay. So my daughter comes to me and says, Mom, you're allowed to come to my school and have lunch with me. The school allows that. And I was thinking, well, I'm in the middle of the show and we're doing this big birthday party. And so she's like, oh, I understand. And it was one of those that made your heart sink. And then later she came to me and I was like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, no, it's not even about the food. I just like talking to you. And I was like, Bobby, I gotta go. I gotta go. So.
You have to go. Also, I wish that I had an invite to the party tonight.
I know, right?
Fun.
Oh, there's so many crafts and different things that we'll be doing. You would totally love it. So sorry to leave, but happy to see you on my way out. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Good to see you too. Happy birthday to your daughter.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Make sure you tell her the same for me. And this was a literal non-negotiable. Sarah was going the whole way and she didn't even set it up as a question. She's tried to set it up as a question. I'm like, you're going.
Well, now it's a surprise because I told her no. I told her I couldn't make it. And so I didn't tell her that I was able to switch it. So it's going to be a surprise.
Love it.
Oh,
yeah.
Love it. Okay. All right, partner. Enjoy.
Thank you. See you, Brooke. Yep. Thank you.
Catch up with you soon. And fresh off her Sports Center hit, as promised. Thank you for being here, Brooke. How did everything go? What was it, 12:25 to 12:30, was it?
It ended up, because TV is always changing, the hit time ended up being closer to 12:10. But then I also forgot I had a radio hit scheduled for 11:45. So there was just a lot of moving parts, but it went great. I mean, I'm set up in this lovely hotel in Owings Mills because I drove in last night to avoid any potential weather. And I'm moving to the Inner Harbor tonight. But I think a lot of people had that idea because the hotel that I'm staying at for the next 2 nights was completely booked up last night. So I'm just getting a tour of the Baltimore area.
I love it. Well, welcome back. It's good to have you here. And obviously, thank you for your generosity, as always, with your time. You've got a lot going on. And as we always like to kind of start with off the top, even though this is the third time around for Ravens Steelers, is, what is the current state of this team entering the postseason? We saw how much they reeled down the stretch, 4 losses in a row. The pass game is really struggling right now. Pickens is coming off a game, obviously, where he not only dropped footballs, but also had some in-game antics that, of course, is always going to generate buzz and whatnot with the media. So what is the current state of the Steelers as we enter Wild Card Weekend?
Yeah, I think that it's a team that is kind of there's 2 different vibes happening, right? And I think defensively, the vibes are great. They started out practice on Tuesday with a mosh pit. DeMonte KZ was in the middle, and he loves his role as a vibes guy. He told me, he's like, I'm kind of childish. That's what I bring. And I just want to keep the good energy going, because even though they lost to the Bengals, it was still a game where the defense played better in that one than they did the first time around against the Bengals, where they gave up 38 points. And in this game, I think they gave up, 19 points? Cam Hayward played out of his mind despite playing with the flu. They had some issues early, some busts early when you have a guy like Corey Trice, who he's in his second year in the league, but really just his first year playing because he was dealing with an injury all last year. They had him singled up on Jamar Chase. That could have gone a lot worse than it did. And so I think that this defense is feeling like it's getting its groove back. And when you mention, TJ Watt is playing in this game closer to 100% than he was the first time around against the Ravens. DeShon Elliott is back. He's a guy that Joey Porter Jr. said this week wants to run through someone's face. And I asked him about that, and he said, yeah, I mean, I'll run through a wall. It really doesn't matter. And I believe him on that. So the defense is going in the right direction. The offense did not start out Tuesday's practice with a mosh pit. I asked how they were going to bring the energy, and Calvin Austin said that they really are just trying to look in the mirror and figure out how to get back to what was working when they were playing better as an offense. Really, the first time they played the Bengals, when they had over 500 yards of offense, Russ threw for over 400 yards of offense. And I think that the key in that game was he let the ball go early and he got the ball in his playmakers' hands. There was a lot of rack, a lot of just letting the skill position players do the work. And I think the thing that has been holding this team back over the last 4 games when they have thrown the ball, because they didn't do that a lot against the Bengals. It was a very conservative game plan. But when Russ has thrown the ball, he's held on to it too long. The decision-making has not been good. He's taken a lot of unnecessary sacks. And I think that the longer he holds on to the ball, the worse the outcome ends up being. And so I think that to get back to what they were doing early, give the ball to Najee Harris out of the backfield, not the pitch play, throw it to him, a screen pass, give it to him in the flat, hit him on a check down. Same thing with Jalen Warren. Get George Pickens going early. Hopefully they have resolved their communication issues, whatever that was last week that led to just a dud of a game from Pickens. But this is a team that is kind of, in some ways, trending in 2 different directions based on which side of the ball you're talking to.
Having consumed just about every piece of content, media scrum, press conference, interview, you name it, over the last 72 hours, I think I can speak to this. Both teams are being extremely buttoned up, right? Like, this is tight-lipped mode for both. This is 2 of the most disciplined teams in the league, although the Ravens certainly aren't from a penalty standpoint, if you look at where they rank statistically in those categories throughout the year. But in terms of the way they're handling the media assignments, no surprise. There is nothing aside from Mike Florio getting involved that's become a hot topic. Pickens said to himself, maybe, I'm not even going to give myself a chance to say something. And as you tweeted out here, he did not make himself available for locker room interviews this week. And you also wrote he typically talks the last day of the practice week, Thursdays, Fridays, depending on the game schedule, but did not today, meaning yesterday. He also declined an interview request post-game against Cincinnati last week. Is he in head case mode, or is he just now trying to kind of dial in, throw up the no rear view mirror, only, full gas, speed ahead? Where is number 14's mind frame at from your perspective?
That's one of the greatest mysteries of our time, or at least of this season, because I don't think this is a calculated, I'm not going to talk because it's Ravens week kind of thing. This has been an ongoing thing throughout the season that George Pickens doesn't want to talk to the media. It doesn't really matter if it's post game and he has a good game, or if it's during the week. He just, for whatever reason, doesn't want to talk, which there's, always controversy about that online among fans. Why should he have to do this? All of those things. But it is, it's part of their contracts. It's something that's agreed to between the league and the union and the Pro Football Writers Association of America, that, you are required to make yourself available during the week and post game. And he didn't make himself available. He wasn't in the locker room. So all we can do is speculate. And that, is a shame, because I hate speculating as a reporter. My job is to report and ask the questions. And when you're not able to do that, this is what you're left with. And so I think coming off of this last game, there's some frustration with him, because not only was that a bad game, but since he hurt his hamstring and missed the second Browns game, he has not been a part of this offense, really. He missed 3 weeks with a hamstring injury, came back against the Chiefs, had a couple catches, but didn't have a huge impact. And then obviously last week was kind of regressed even more. And when he was targeted in the third and fourth quarter, he ended up with 3 drops. And that is, I think, not typical of him. He's a very explosive player, has a really good catch radius, is good at those contested catches, and things that he would typically be able to do, he just wasn't doing. And I think from what I have seen of him in his time in Pittsburgh, when things don't go well from the jump, the longer it takes to get him going, the less likely it is that he's going to be able to pull himself out of that rut and get right within the context of that game. And so I think when, the Steelers made a concerted effort to go to him early on the second play of that Bengals game, threw him the ball, it was a screen pass, got blown up at the line of scrimmage, didn't gain any yards. And then they went really conservative in their approach, running the ball. So by the time they go back to him in the third quarter, he's pretty checked out at that point, and very frustrated. And you see him, looks like he was yelling at a fan. Pat Freiermuth is having to hold him back. Again, we don't know what happened because he did not make himself available. And Mike Tomlin, when we asked him about it, said he hadn't seen the interaction. The Steelers have a long history of dealing with wide receivers who have colorful personalities that can be mercurial. And George Pickens is kind of the latest of that. And at this point, it kind of feels like the Steelers go how he goes. And that is a really scary roller coaster ride to be riding going into the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure that they're going to need him. And obviously he's given the Ravens fits in recent years. So if he can turn things around, you get the sense that this could be very, very interesting, especially with no Zay Flowers. Talk about a tale of two games this year. First one obviously was in Pittsburgh, goes in the Steelers' favor. And then just within the last month or so, the Ravens take care of business. And when I think about what Pittsburgh did well, and of course, there were plenty of self-inflicted wounds that the Ravens just shot themselves in the foot with that first time around. But generally speaking, they refused to be beaten by Mark Andrews. The numbers show that. They have defended him incredibly well. And they typically force Derek and Lamar to challenge them laterally. And when you do that, you take them all the vertical, all the downhill stuff, all the explosiveness that makes them one of one respectively out of the equation. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, something obscure happens, a special teams, something or other happens because it's classic Ravens Steelers. What do you get the sense this time around? No Zay Flowers. What will the defensive approach be? You already mentioned they're going to be kind of a shot in the arm with TJ being healthier than he was the second time around, DeShon being available, but their defensive approach coming in, you think is what?
I think that it's stopping the run early. The interesting thing about this Steelers playoff slide, they haven't won a playoff game in 8 years. In those games, they have fallen in a significant hole early. Most of the games, this is so crazy. In most of them, I think the Chiefs lost a couple of years ago is the exception. They were down 21-0, either in the first quarter or early second quarter. They've been down 3 scores way too many times in the playoffs. And so I think that to rectify that and get off to a faster start, if the offense can't score, the defense has got to slow down the run and at least give the offense more possessions. Because the thing that when they have lost this season, a lot of it has been because the offense has not had time to possess the ball or they're not extending drives. And that does put more of a burden on the defense that is, probably unfair that the offense isn't holding up its end of the bargain, but they have just got to keep giving the offense chances to try to get something going. When you look at the way that those 2 games, Derrick Henry rushed for 100 more yards than he did in the first game against the Steelers this year. A big part of that was because DeShon Elliott wasn't out there. But I think that has got to be the key. I think they're really going to attack the line of scrimmage. I think Patrick Queen has to have a game that was more like the one he had the first time around against the Ravens. This last one was not his best outing. And I think that this is a defense that just has to play fundamental sound football. They've talked a lot in recent weeks about resolving communication issues that were leading to a lot of back-end busts within the linebacker core. They resolved a lot of that against the Bengals, but I think the other thing is that they can't play hero ball. That's something that guys mentioned this week, particularly when it comes to as much juice as you want to have for a Ravens-Steelers playoff game. You can't bring too much juice. You can't do too much, because when you do that, then it leads to things that are being stretched too thin in other parts of the defense. If a guy's playing out of position, then yeah, he might make a play one time, but if he does it again, maybe the Ravens exploit that. When you look at, Minkah Fitzpatrick's interception against the Ravens a couple weeks ago was because he was kind of playing out of position. It worked out well for him that time, but it doesn't always. Sometimes it leads to broken plays and touchdowns, and Isaiah Likely wide open in the end zone. So I think that they've got to be more fundamentally sound. They've got to do everything they can to limit the tight ends and stop Derrick Henry early, and then worry about Lamar Jackson. When I think about the list of things, it's just like, okay, great, there's no Zay Flowers, but you still have to account for this guy and this guy and this guy. And I'm just thrilled that I'm not Tara Loston in this game, because I do not envy the job that he has.
I keep saying it. They've never been more prepared to be without their number one wide receiver throughout the Lamar era than they are right now. And just imagine, I hate to keep bringing his name up, but the opportunity that Deontay Johnson had, not only to go up against his former team twice, but with Zay having injuries, Rashad being banged up, Nelly being in concussion protocol in recent weeks. what a golden opportunity that he just completely fumbled. Now, I know he's going to be in the postseason with Houston, but man, I keep thinking about that. Brooke, Mike Tomlin, as you know, has not won a playoff game since 2016. There are constant, I feel like this time of year for years now on end, there's just these constant rumors that are swirling. The latest is that would he be traded? Would it be to Chicago? You've seen all this. And so I guess I just wonder if the Steelers were to go one and done. This is the longest tenured head coach in the league. Of course, John Harbaugh is the second, a year behind him. How do you gauge the temperature of ownership in the event that happens tomorrow night, one and done?
I'm going to be really interested to hear what Art Rooney has to say in a couple weeks whenever he does his end of season wrap up press conference with members of the media in Pittsburgh, because last year he said that he felt urgency and that he felt like they came off the field in Buffalo, having lost that game, having had another one and done, but feeling like they were closer than they've been in recent years to breaking that drought. And he felt like they were just a quarterback away. And so they go out and they get Russell Wilson, they get Justin Fields. It feels like, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the year. And it felt like it was through more than half the season. And then the wheels came off. And I think that, coupled with the way that these playoff losses have gone, with these teams just not looking prepared, quite honestly, against their opponents. And it doesn't matter if they had a bye. They had a bye the year that they lost to Jacksonville. And they got down early against the Browns when they hosted a home playoff game in the COVID year. First snap, it goes over Ben Roethlisberger's head, and the Browns score like 6 seconds into the game. And so I think that I would have to imagine that Art Rooney is getting more frustrated because it just is this cycle that can't be broken. Now, he has complete trust in Mike Tomlin. That's why he gave him a 3-year extension last year after losing to Buffalo. But the vibe was so different in that situation, because in each of the last couple playoff berths for the Steelers, it's been they've played their way into almost being irrelevant by the midpoint in the season, and then they have these crazy second half rallies and they go in as an underdog on the road, but hey, they're not even really supposed to be here. What a great coaching job.
Right.
This is kind of the opposite. They had a chance to win the AFC North. They had a 2-game lead and completely squandered it. And yes, it was a really tough stretch of the season, a really difficult schedule. They were missing players, all of these things, but the Chiefs were missing players. The Ravens were missing players. They came out on the other side of those gauntlet stretches fine. And I think that this is a year when having one playoff win would be considered a successful season. I think if they, had hosted a playoff game and won it, and then, lost in the next round, or even made it to the AFC Championship game and lost, I would consider that like, okay, they met or exceeded expectations. At this point, it feels like they're falling short. But because of how I think steady Art Rooney is, I would be very surprised if there's a head coaching change. They're not going to fire Mike Tomlin. Trading is intriguing. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if I'm the Steelers, I don't know that I publicly listen to offers, but I at least maybe make a pro and con list. I still don't think that they end up doing that, but I think that the temperature would be turned up if he's back for another season, which I expect him to be at this point. I have to imagine the frustration is growing more and more and more. And at some point there could be consequences, but I don't know when that will be.
It's funny how this stuff works. These guys have been around for almost 2 decades, Tomlin and Harbaugh, and it feels like this is just sort of a revolving topic of conversation. It's a recycled topic that comes up around this time every single year. So appreciate your insights there. And do you have a prediction for us before we get you out of here?
I love what Sarah, how she didn't know what to go, was waffling back and forth, because that is how I feel. I keep comparing Steelers Ravens to Carolina Duke basketball, because it does not matter who has the more talented roster or what Vegas says. Throw all of that out, because just insane things happen every time. I agree with her that it's going to be a lower scoring game than the last one. I was kind of thinking 21-17, along those lines. A field goal decides it, because gosh, wouldn't that just be perfect? Chris Boswell has a first team AP All-Pro season. Justin Tucker, one of the best to ever do it. one of those guys is going to get a chance at a game-winning field goal. At this point, it seems like this should be a game the Ravens win. But almost because I'm thinking that it'll be the game that Steelers and Mike Tomlin devil magic come back and help them win a game that they have no business winning. But I think I'm going to go Ravens 21-17, but I truly will not be surprised no matter what happens. The only thing that would surprise me is if the Ravens absolutely blow out the Steelers. That would shock me. Or if the Steelers, like a blowout, either direction would be surprising, but a close game, I think either team can win.
I'll be really curious too if it does start to go in the Ravens' favor early. How desperate does Pittsburgh get? You know, how creative do they get? How many chances did they get? We know in the first game when Justin was healthy, they kind of knocked the Ravens off their feet a little bit there with a couple of those keepers, and that worked well for some positive plays. I know he's healthy now, right? He's not dealing with the abdominal issues, so he'll be at least an option. And you wonder if they'll kind of dive into their vault, so to speak, if things start to get out of hand early. But looking forward to it. So live from Owings Mills, Maryland, we got Brooke Pryor in the house. She's in the Maryland area, getting her way down to Inner Harbor later on tonight. But hey, have an awesome weekend, Brooke. Thank you for spending some time with us, especially on a day where you're going from Sports Center to radio hits to live streaming. We appreciate you. And let us know, by the way, if people want to check in on the Pittsburgh side of things with what you have reporting wise, writing wise over the next 24 hours, where they can find you and what you have coming up.
It will all be on ESPN.com under the NFL tab. Had a story earlier this week about the playoff utility in Pittsburgh and what has gone wrong in that stretch. And then everything else is on Twitter at BE Pryor.
Love it. Brooke, thanks so much. Happy New Year. It's great to see you again. And I can feel pretty confident that we won't be doing this again until the fall, but crazier things happen. So we'll catch up with you soon, Brooke.
Who knows? Thanks for having me. See ya.
All right, later. Brooke Pryor, ESPN.com, kind enough to spend some time with us for the second time this year. And of course, this is the third time the Ravens and Steelers will meet, and that is what we're working our way towards. I guess it's time for my prediction. So 9.5 right now. The Ravens are your home favorites, which obviously when you think about the history of Baltimore and Pittsburgh, that's a staggering number. But I think it speaks to where the Ravens are, where they've been, and where Vegas feels like they are right now going into the postseason as one of the hottest teams not named Kansas City among the playoff field. So, all right, 21-17, right, is what Brooke went with. Does anyone remember Sarah's specific prediction? I want to say she was like, what did she go? 24-17? I want to say that was Sarah's. I'm going to go 27-17. I think this is a game that in order for the Ravens to win, they obviously need to play clean football. They need to play disciplined football. And they need, from the jump, an identity that establishes the run, unlike they were able to do in the AFC Championship game a year ago, of course, against the Kansas City Chiefs. King Henry brings an element that they have never had in the postseason, obviously. He comes in as an ascending 31-year-old. He's healthy. At times, we questioned usage earlier on in the season. That is an afterthought at this point. And I think if you give him a hefty, healthy amount of carries, good things are going to happen. And all of a sudden, you can start to develop the passing game outside of Derek. Zay Flowers being gone is significant. But as I just mentioned to Brooke a minute ago, I don't think throughout the Lamar era, the Ravens have ever been in a situation where they are more prepared than they are right now to go on for one game, hopefully just 1 week, without their number one wide receiver. If Pittsburgh does what it has in the past, it will sell out to stop Mark Andrews. The Steelers refuse to be beaten by Mark Andrews. The tough part for them is you got Isaiah Likely. You've got a really deep backfield with Derek, and Justice Hill will be available, by the way. Keaton Mitchell perhaps can be used in some situations if you want to kind of sub him in for some misdirection. How about the screen game early on? I think will be important to keep Pittsburgh on its toes. And obviously, I expect Baltimore's defensive front to do what it's done all year long, and that is dominate in the trenches, establish a point of attack, and make sure that you keep Pittsburgh's rushing offense at bay to force Russell Wilson and company to do what they really haven't been able to do consistently down the stretch throughout this 4-game losing streak, and that is pass the ball effectively to win. I'm going Ravens 27-17. Looks like there's some inclement weather coming in overnight. It's going to be chilly. May the best man win. Ravens march on to the divisional round in a do-or-die playoff game under the primetime lights. Tickets are still available, by the way. If you're feeling like you want to go, if you're feeling like you want to splurge a little bit to kick off 2025, I would highly urge you to do so. Pittsburgh travels as really as good as any fan base across the country. So just keep that in mind going in.